Okay, good. This is a messenger's tale. The introduction to our story takes place long, long, long time ago in a small country called Wales, which if you look carefully you can see it here. Wales is surrounded by the Irish Sea, and the English Channel comes around here, the Bristol Channel, St George's Channel. It's surrounded by sea except for this border here. On the western border it connects to England. And Wales at the time of our story was a nation in turmoil. It was divided into regions with fierce and powerful strong leaders. Each region was ruled by a king. One of these was a man called Gruffydd ap Llywelyn, and that might sound like a strange name, but if you're a Welsh king, that's a perfectly fine name. Gruffydd had conquered several of the other Welsh kings around this region here to become the king of all of Wales, and that was pretty unusual. The sight of his battle flags, over here we have his coat of arms, brought terror into the hearts of many because he was so powerful. He then decided to attack a part of England right next door to Wales, called Hereford, on the border. Perhaps he had plans to eventually take over the whole of England, but either way he set out to conquer. At first he was successful, so a large part of the English borderlands became part of Wales. And the king in England, a guy called Edward the Confessor, was pretty unhappy about this because he was not very well known for his battle strategy and good decisions, although everyone said he was a pretty nice guy. A relative of his called Harold set off with a mighty army to get rid of Gruffydd and take back the land. The need to defend themselves is just one of man's fundamental needs. As a result of this attack, Gruffydd was eventually killed. So clearly this story is not about him. But it is worth knowing that his death meant that several men were fighting to become the one king of Wales again, and so again it was divided into small kingdoms. And some men were even setting up new kingdoms just so they could be a king. In fact, it's important to know that Wales was considered a bit of a threat still to England. In the 3 years after Gruffydd's death, King Edward died and Harold became the King of England. Now, just before that happened, Harold had decided it would be a really bad idea to let another powerful leader, like Gruffydd ap Llywelyn, rise up and unite all of Wales again, because he knew that he was likely to become the next King of England. So here is where our story really begins. One dark, cold and stormy evening, a king sent for a messenger. The king was Caradog, the king of Gwent, a brand new kingdom in Wales. An army from England was invading, and they were coming to conquer. So Caradog had not heard anything from the battle for a while, and he wanted to know what was going on. He got his messenger ready, because the need for communication is really, really important. You have to know what's going on. So the particular messenger that was chosen was a young man called Gwyn, who had joined the army to become a famous warrior. But he was really looking to improve his situation in life and gain greater social acceptance and honour because he came from a poor family. But because he came from a poor family, he was given the jobs that nobody wanted to do. And being a messenger was just about the worst job of all. If a messenger brought good news, he could be rewarded with things. He could get a nice meal and a clean pile of straw to sleep on. And everybody knows how important it is to get a good sleep and have shelter and food. So, this sounds great, right? Well, it was even rumoured that some messengers had been met with such favour by the king that they were given the best jobs in the king's court and rewarded with fantastic riches. And one messenger, it was rumoured that one messenger had even received from the king the honorary title of general. But some actually think that might be due to the fact that all the rest of the army had died, and if the messenger was executed like normally happened when they brought bad news, the king would actually be the first king in Wales to ever lose an entire army. So, that would have been pretty embarrassing. And we all know that embarrassment is not a good thing. The usual thing, of course, for the poor frightened messengers who delivered the bad news to the king was to pay that penalty of death, an untimely and rather gruesome death, for ruining the king's dinner. And as it usually was bad news, this was the fate that met most of the poor messengers. Which is actually why, what explains why nobody actually wanted the job. In fact, the only worst job was being the king's cupbearer. Because the king's cupbearer had to taste the king's meal before the king tasted it every single time. Sounds great, right? No, because the problem was people tried to poison the king to get rid of him. So when the cupbearer tasted the food, if it was poisonous, well, that was the end of them. It seemed that everybody wanted to be king. Anyway, back to the poor young man, sent out in the night to find out about a battle on the border of the kingdom of Gwent. Wind ran for hours in the darkness, his warm breath creating little steamy clouds in the night air. The rain chilled him to the bone as he stumbled on and on for hours. Finally, as the sun began to rise slowly in the east, he heard the clash of metal and the eerie cries that told him that battle was near. He collapsed to the ground, gratefully catching his breath. A few moments later, he crept forward up the steep slope of the hill. Nearing the top, he dropped to his stomach in the grass, and he concealed himself near a small bush on the edge of the hill overlooking the battle. As the sun chased away the shadows from the sky, he looked down in horror. The last of the king's army were running in defeat. They were escaping into the forest nearby in the shadows. The rest of the victorious army from the English were setting up their camp, and they were dividing the spoils. Well, they thought it seemed wasteful to leave a perfectly good pair of boots lying on a dead soldier. And everybody needs a good pair of boots, as it's important to have the right clothing for the right occasion. Exhausted and despairing, Gwyn knew he was in trouble. It was his duty to return to the king and to tell him that his army had run for the hills and that the enemy were coming to take over his kingdom. Imagine what that fantastic news is going to meet with. He knew he would pay for it with his life. He thought of his poor mother, left alone without a family. What would become of her? And his dream of glory and fame was fading too. Tears ran down his face as he wriggled back down the edge of the hill and turned slowly to make his way back to the palace. He stumbled as he reached the bottom of the hill, and he fell face first into the mud. Yuck! Sticky, ooey, gooey mud stuck to him. He picked up some of the damp grass from the day and wiped it off his face, tried to get it off him. And as he did, he looked down, as he chucked down the grass, he looked down and he saw the impression in the grass of where he'd fallen. And all of a sudden, he had the best idea. And a renewed hope. He had something to believe in. He prayed to whatever God might be favouring him, that his plan would work. With the last of his strength, Gwyn made his way back. He was so exhausted that it took him much longer than the night before. He was almost faint from lack of sleep. The sun had passed the meridian at lunchtime and was beating down on his back. He could feel the tips of his ears growing pink with sunburn. And the mud was caked on, almost baked on. And when he arrived back at the palace, he didn't go to the king first. He went into the nearby village. He gathered the villagers together and he told them his new plan. They were horrified about the coming invasion, and they knew that the attack would cause their lives to change forever. Everything that was precious to them would be lost, even their very culture. Before they panicked and ran off to hide, he shared his idea. The villagers set to work gathering supplies. They helped the exhausted messenger up onto a sturdy little donkey and followed Gwyn back to the battleground. Late morning, 2 days later, the king rose around mid-morning. He dressed regally as kings do and sat down to a lavish breakfast that happily passed the 33rd cupbearer's test. He just finished off the last morsel of the apple left over from the spit-roasted pig's mouth, when the announcement was made that his messenger had arrived back from the battle. There was not a sound as Gwyn entered the room, and he bent down on one knee to report to the king. "Well," asked King Caradog. "Sire, the battle went badly, but not all is lost. The enemy have departed," announced the now ragged-looking and mud-covered messenger. Naturally suspicious, who wouldn't be when you are 33 years old and have already gone through 33 cupbearers, the king asked for more details. "Well," replied Gwyn, "I came upon the battle and your army was in ruins. The remaining few were running into the forest as fast as they could and heading for the hills. The enemy were celebrating their victory." The king raised his hand to signal that the messenger should be thrown into the dungeon for bringing such terrible news. "But sire, we have won," announced Gwyn quickly before the guards could seize him. "What? Are you trying to trick me? Are you making a fool out of me?" asked the king furiously. "No, sire, not at all," replied the poor young man desperately. "It is the enemy that I have made a fool out of." "Explain," roared the king. So Gwyn told the king how he had convinced the villagers that the entire village was at threat and would be destroyed if they did not stop the attackers. He explained his idea to the villagers, and they went back with him towards the enemy's camp. While the enemy slept, after celebrating for some time, the villagers had gone to a nearby clearing, and they had walked around and around and around for hours to create the muddy mess, giving the impression that a strong and powerful army had been there on their way to the invasion. They put up tent-like structures using sticks and material and any branches that they could find to create a camp-type look. As the sun rose, the villagers crept back to the edge of the forest to watch what happened. The enemy came marching over the hill and sent their scouts ahead, and the scouts came running ahead into the clearing. When they saw what seemed to be a mighty army on the way to join the battle, they panicked. They rushed back to the English general and they told him that there was a mighty army in the next clearing ready to join the battle and attack. Wow. Hearing this report, the leader of the English army decided to abandon the attack and return to England, at least for now. The king was amazed to hear this news, and he was impressed with the bravery and smart thinking of the actions of Gwyn. Gwyn's clever idea had saved the whole kingdom and brought glory to the king. The king made Gwyn a general, and the poor villagers were rewarded. When some of the soldiers who had deserted after the battle finally returned, he gave them the job of messengers. After all, they'd proven quite good at running. And the messengers in this story are, leave a good impression, think things through, and don't be afraid to tackle difficult situations. Oh, and it pays to have the neighbours on your side, so be nice to them. The history of man, woman too, humans in other words, is full of sad, interesting, exciting, and terrible things. Throughout history, the actions of some have had consequences for many, many people. And there are things that man needs to survive and live well. Battles have been fought over these things. We call these things the fundamental needs of humans. Can you tell me, from the story, can you tell me some of the things that you think that we need to feel safe, to survive, and to live well? You may have heard some of them in the story. Got some ideas? Hariki?
Maybe think first before attacking.
So thinking first before attacking? Yeah. What do we need as humans? That's what we need to do, but what do we need to live and survive? What do we need?
Food.
We need food, absolutely.
Water and shelter.
Water and shelter.
Communication.
Communication. The king really needed to know what was going on. Anything else? Now you may remember a part in the story. Yeah,
Is it transportation?
Transportation, that's right, he was tired, he needed that donkey, eh? Yeah, sometimes we need more than just our feet. There are lots of these different things, and we're going to look at them in the material for the fundamental human needs. But what I just want to go back to at the moment, it was one part in the story that I threw in there that said that they were taking the boots of the soldier. Do you remember that bit?
Clothing.
The clothing, yeah. How did you respond when I said that? What was your thinking or feeling when I said that? Because I said it in a story kind of way. I'm just interested in what your thinking was at that time. How did it make you feel when you heard that bit?
It grossed out.
You're grossed out, yeah. You know, there are some terrible things that happen in war, the way that we treat each other. I'm actually kind of glad that you were grossed out about it, because the easiest thing in the world, and the way that I put that was kind of quite light and almost humorous, and I wanted to see whether or not you would see it like that, or whether it would disturb you. Because sometimes we lose touch with our humanity. We lose touch with caring about others through things. You know, war is a really brutal thing, and it damages a lot of people, and it forces people to face the worst of humanity. So I just want to, we might have a discussion about that a little bit later on, if you think you can cope with it, about how important it is for us to really care about others and about our world, and to not have that kind of approach. And those things do happen in war. That's how terrible it gets. Those things do happen. So I want you to be, you know, that's one of the reasons why Maria Montessori talked about peace. She wanted us to really understand that these terrible things happen, and she wanted us to avoid these terrible things. So it's really important that we keep our humanity and that we work towards humanity. And her whole Montessori education was all about peace, about educating you guys so that you understand how important peace is, and that you make a difference so that we have a peaceful world. Thanks, guys.
Stop. Did you stop it? No.